What risks did you take as an adolescent? What risks did you take? You cut school. All right. All righty. What were your friends doing? Cutting school with me. Whose house do you think I was hanging at? What were some of the other activities that your friends were up to? Drinking and smoking weed. Gin and juice. So you all were pretty active. You were pretty active. All righty. Would some of you say that you had friends who did not make it? What happened? Where are they? Some of them died? Didn't make it? What about others? Drugs, life in jail? Okay. Some of them ended up not where they wanted to be. No child wakes up and says, you know what, I think I want to get killed when I'm 19. Nobody says that. And that's not what we hope for young people. When you look at your Dear Little letter, your highest hope is not that they don't do drugs or that you don't get pregnant, even though that's sometimes the way we set up our fiscal systems, right, with young people. So a quick question, the last question that I have for you is, some of the friends that you've named, you all went through and had similar experiences, and some of them ended up where they didn't want to be. And you are here working with young people. What made the difference? Why you and not them? And so I heard someone say it had to do with your ambition, so your personal drive, your support system. Unpack that for me a little bit. What was your support system? Family. So some adult. Was it always a parent? Was it for somebody else? Was it somebody other than a parent? Tanaja?
I was a runaway for like a long time when I was a teenager. There was a lot of, my parents are Jehovah's Witnesses and we haven't always seen eye to eye. And so for me, it was really like, I had done certain things before I ran away. I had worked when I was 14. I went to a college prep high school. So I had like learned, I had some basic competencies, you know, and 10 years later, 26, 27, I realized, you know, my parents did a pretty decent job with me, even if we didn't see eye to eye. And so there's always been a part of me that like lays back and observes, you know what I mean? And I was like, wow, I mean, I would, you know, be out in the streets, of course, you know, but wild parties, drank, smoked, or whatever. And I'm like, wow, this guy's messed up. He can't make it home. I don't want that to be me. You know what I mean? So there's an element of looking at, and I don't want that to be me. And then like, even when like home wasn't a good place for me, I would always go to school. Like I had teachers that I could talk to, I had guidance counselors, and I had people who like, you know, sometimes I listened and sometimes I didn't, but I knew they were there for me to go to. Okay. And so that was what made the difference for me.
So you said a lot in there that I want to make sure that we didn't miss, that there were adults in your life, even if it wasn't your parents, it was guidance counselors, adults that cared about you, and that also you set high expectations for yourself, and that your parents, even when you didn't agree, set them for you.
I think it's important to know community as well, because for me, I lived in my apartment building for over 30 years, so I grew up there, and nowadays it's not the same, you know, and what the neighborhoods look like, but at the time, for maybe the first 20 years of my life, it was the same resident, so just knowing that they would ask me in the hallway, you know, what I got on my report card. Right. So they provided the community separate from my family that I also didn't want to disappoint, and I knew that they had expectations of me as well.
Okay. So fantastic. What you all have just articulated, forgive me 1 second, I left my notes over here, which is not nice, is there was a research study that came out many years ago that did just that. They looked at common risk factors. Remember the term at-risk youth? Okay? Everybody used to talk about these youth are at risk. They're at risk. And this represented part of what we did in terms of research. There was a tendency to focus on, when you're dealing with young people who had multiple factors, poverty, homelessness, mental illness, health, the parents in the home who have alcoholism or substance abuse issues. And there was a tendency to focus on what's going to happen to them. And it almost kind of was this death knell pronouncement that if you have these factors in your life, then death and mayhem are going to be your inheritance. That was kind of the way the research looked at it. They looked at all of the casualties and came up with these terms. They're at risk for this happening to them. But there was a research shift early in the 70s and 80s that began to say, can we just take a moment and not focus on what we think is the inevitable outcome, but let's look at the survivors. Not everybody ended up this way. And let's look at what made the difference. And many of the things that they found are some of the things that you just articulated, that there were high expectations, that there were communities of support, and that there were people who cared about them. The Kawaii longitudinal study, I must admit, the first time I heard about this, I was like, really? Young people in Hawaii? How difficult can this be? They're living in island paradise. But geography does not dictate everything. So they were living in a community that had very high alcoholism rates, very high dropout rates, very difficult circumstances, very similar to the ones that many of our young people are living with. And this study challenged the myth that a child who is in a high-risk group is fated to become a loser. They challenged that. They said, let's look at this. And they found that for at least 1/3 of the young people that they were studying, they were doing well. They were coming out of this on the other side. And even those who were quote-unquote troubled, there were opportunities where they turned their lives around, where something shifted and they were able to recover from it. In short, they had the presence of what we now know are resiliency factors. These are the things that enabled them to bounce back from whatever circumstance they were born into. And so this presented a foundation for youth development. We believe that if we promote certain factors within the lives of young people, that there is no expiration date. There is no fated existence, that they can still maintain and take back some power in their lives. And those factors are high expectations. And this is in your implementation guide. Help me out, page 24. Caring and trusting relationships. Opportunities for contribution. High expectations. Engaging activities. Continuities of support so that there's some consistency. And a caring, trusting adult. And we heard you say some of these. For those of you who are thinking about what made the difference between me and where some of my friends ended up, are these some of the factors that you experienced?